Italy for the start of the International Touring Car Championship for 1986. This is Monza. It's the home of Italian motor racing, and it's the first of 14 rounds that we shall be covering during the course of the season. Let's look at the cars. First, Volvo, prepared by RAS this year and retaining only Thomas Lindstrom of the winning pair of drivers from 1985. Rover still have Tom Wilkinshaw in the TWR prepared cars heading their three-car team. They've obviously got strength numerically. Here we see the Ford XR4 TI of Rudy Eggenberger's team turning a wheel for the first time. They've got Stephen Soper in the team from Rover last year. It should be a very strong combination, particularly when the Cosworth engine comes along. BMW will profit most from the new regulations. That doesn't come until April the 1st, but they've still got Dieter Cuesta and Roberto Ravaglia in the team and could be very much a force to be reckoned with this year. For Class B honours, they've got the new 325, and that's up against Danny Snowbeck's Mercedes, which ran in the French Championship last year and are in the European this. General Motors mean business. Peter Brock is over with the Commodore for a number of races. And also Alan Grice is there, fast in a straight line, a determined driver if an unsponsored car. Brock beat the Rovers on 2 occasions in New Zealand.
Volvo has some interesting pairings for the ETC for 1986. And Thomas Lindstrom, of course, the numero uno man of Volvo last year. And Johnny Cicotto, of course, needs no introduction to European touring car fans. And I would say quite a combination.
Yes, I think a very good combination.
I'm glad he's modest, Johnny. Do you think he's quite modest about the fact you do have a good combination as a driving pairing?
Well, I think it's very important. I mean, with the experience from Thomas from in Volvo and in the European circuits all around, and with myself, of course, I think we can do a good job this year.
Tom, you opened the European Touring Car Championship last year and the year before with a win at Monza, and you're going for a hat-trick. How difficult is it going to be, and how tough is the competition this year compared to previous years?
Well, I think that it's going to be very hard. I would reckon there'll be 5 or 6 cars will be in a bunch at the beginning of the race, just slipstreaming past each other because it's very high speed run here. So I think it's going to be very, very hard.
Dieter Cuesta, how good is BMW looking for season 86?
I think much better than last year, and the problem at the moment is that the Evolution engine we get for Donington, that's in about 2 weeks for the next ETC race.
A number of familiar marks start the ETC here at Monza, but a new face and a new sign. Ford is back into racing, and Steve Soper joins Rudy Eggenberger's team, an exciting team for 86, and you look quite happy about it too.
Yes, I'm very pleased to be here.
Tell me about the car, how long it's taken to put the cars together, and your hopes for the future with the Cosworth.
Well, obviously 87 is going to be the year, hopefully, that the car will be an out-and-out championship winner. But this year is really a test year, and for everybody to get used to it. It's obviously a new car to Rudy Eggenberger. It's a new car, a new team to me. And we're obviously Ford, it's fairly new to, the European circuit.
You know, a number of generals have marched throughout Europe over the years, and some have been successful. For 1986, the new general has arrived in Europe. It's called the Commodore. Not the Opel Commodore, but the Aussie V8 Commodore. And this is the car that Peter Brock and Alan Moffat will campaign in rounds of the European Touring Car Championship. We also have 2 Australian privateers, and Alan Grice and Graham Bailey, who'll be campaigning the V8 Aussie Muscle Power. The man, of course, who Australians look up to as the leading touring car driver, car builder and racer extraordinaire is Peter the Perfect Brock.
We're spending a bit of time learning what makes the car go fast at this particular circuit at Monza. For instance, we arrived here and the car was immediately quick, but in order to make it go quicker, we've actually been making a few wrong decisions, so now we've got a fair bit of work to do before the race.
We've simply got more power than Brock. I'm a second and a half quicker than him here so far, and I think I'll stretch that a bit further. We were 2 seconds quicker than him at Bathurst. My car goes quicker in a straight line, and you don't need a lot of driving skill to hold the accelerator on the floor.
Jean-Louis Schlesser, 34 years old Frenchman, starts from pole position, but already Alan Grice is showing himself to be very much a man to be watched, being the fastest of the Commodores. And as the pace car pulls off, always used at the rolling start in all the international touring car races, into the lead it's Rover. Schlesser, as expected, Behind him, the first of the Volvos, the second Volvo up, and then Grice and two more Rovers. Ulf Granberg leading the Volvo challenge from Cecotto, and then of course Walkinshaw, currently ahead of the third of the Rover team, and the first of the BMWs quite well up as well. Grice up to third place now, and pressing hard. Brock too is going well, but still it's Schlesser in the lead, with a small advantage now over the rest of the field. Two Toyotas spin out there, John Nielsen being one of them, a fancied runner who rolls out of the race. But Grice now past the second of the Volvos and hard on the tail of the Rover. One lap later and he's ahead. An Australian leads in Europe for the first time. Yokohama tyres are giving Grice an advantage over both Rover and Volvo. Rover on Dunlop, Volvo on Pirelli. But Cecotto now is determined to stay with the Australian. He's through up and past the Rover opposition. The Venezuelan, who survived a practice fire, determined to make his position firm as team leader. Grice over the curves, and the Volvo follows suit. Now being impeded by a slower car, however, his lead has begun to shrink. The tyres are going off, and Cecotto comes through into the lead. It looks like a replay of last year. Once out in front, the ex-Grand Prix driver begins to go away. The second of the Eggenberger Fords making their debut gets himself onto the rough stuff here, overtaking a BMW, or rather being overtaken by one, but loses a wheel shortly afterwards and is out of the race. Grice now has fallen back into the Rover opposition. Schlesser is past him, and worrying on his tail is Tom Walkinshaw. Through on the inside of slower cars, Walkinshaw gets sideways there and alongside. Meanwhile, Thomas Lindstrom waits for the Volvo to come in Cecotto's hands. The pit stop, a bit of a panic, seems to be going well, until, unfortunately, the car cannot be restarted. The battery is flat and there's total confusion. Thomas presses the button, Johnny watches, and they try to start it from a Slade battery. Something that causes consternation, they have to stop it again and put another battery aboard the car. But meanwhile, the Rover is in for a tyre change and Win Percy to take over.
Well, Tom, looking pretty good for a 1-2-3. A good way to start the season.
Well, I think it's far too early yet, so why don't you come back after the race?
But I'm the eternal optimist.
Yeah, I'm the racing driver.
Yeah, I know, there is a difference, isn't there?
Did he know something we didn't know? Schlesser was to retire and the Walkinshaw-Percy car took over the lead. BMW up to third place, and in spite of a damaged spoiler, it was the hat-trick for Tom Walkinshaw and Win Percy as the flag. At Donington Park in England, wintry weather greeted the crews and the teams. And already before the start, there was talk of a tyre problem. Weaving to warm them up was the order of the day, and the pace car pulled off to see Rovers pull into the lead with first and second places. Grice slotted in behind them, and although the Volvos had practiced well and were in fourth and fifth position at the start, they began to fall back. Brock, the two BMWs, and Alum in the third of the Rovers were only too anxious to take over where they'd left off, however. The Fords were going well too, but it was the Rover dominating the race as the weather got worse and worse. Soon those Yokohamas began to work, and Grice closed in. Alum too came up past the Volvos and had a go at the BMWs. The Rover team management, under Andy Morrison, rules with a rod of iron. As Grice begins to close the gap, there's no doubt what's going on in the Rover pit. Schlesser drops back behind Walkinshaw. Through one of Donington's new tight hairpins, very unpopular with the drivers, the Rovers go first and second into Redgate. But Grice is still closing. Down through the old hairpin. But now the Holdens are rapidly closing the gap. Alum is still there, threatening behind them both. Power on, power off, still feeling for adhesion. And here's Berger's car after its contretemps with Allen. Suddenly, the Rovers are split. Grice has managed to get himself between them, and Brock is right on their tail. There are slower cars in the way. The light is beginning to fade. The skies are filling, and Grice is in the lead. Holding the two Rovers at bay, however, is one thing. Can he do the same to Brock? Up to second place now goes the second of the Australians. The new 325 BMWs are dominating the Mercedes at Donington, just as they did at Monza. Now it's Brock's turn. Ahead of Alan Grice, he takes over the lead. Walkinshaw tries to fight back. Brock's tenure of office, however, there is not to be a long one. He has tyre problems and is in the pit for a change. Grice too has his problems and is falling back. As Brock goes out of the pits, back into the lead goes Rover. Tom Walkinshaw once again dominates the race. Grice holds on as best he can, but must soon come in for a tyre change. Meanwhile, Wyn Percy, his feet getting cold, is waiting for the Rover's scheduled stop. It's a picture of organisation. Off come the wheels, in go the fuels, in goes Winston Percy, and it's back into the race as far as the Rover's concerned in double quick time. They're in line for another hat-trick here as well. Berger's BMW comes in for Revelia to take over. This is the car so badly damaged early in the race, but he's fought up to third place. The Rover leads. Lindstrom has come up to second place in the Volvo that he's taken over from Cecotto, with the Granberg-Olofsson Volvo fourth. Revelia takes the BMW back into the race, however, soon to inherit second position. He starts, and almost simultaneously, into the pits comes the reigning European champion. Thomas Lindstrom is out of the car, looking very disconsolate indeed. Following their problems at Monza, it's yet another disappointment, and he tells us why.
It's the gearbox. I lost all the gears. I have just the fifth gear left, and it was too much for the clutch in the hairpins and the chicane, so also the clutch is now broken.
The cold hand of fate, therefore, has struck at Volvo, leaving the number 2 car in third place. The BMW in second, Grice retiring, Brock finishing further down, and a win once more for Tom Walkinshaw and Wyn Percy with the Rover. 2 down already this season for the Coventry team. It's a popular victory. Wyn Percy has got his hat-trick, and Tom Walkinshaw tells us just how difficult it was.
It was pretty hard, you know, to stay out on the slicks in the beginning when it was raining. It was a gamble we had to take because we knew our only chance was for a one pit stop race. And I felt that, you know, if I could just keep going on the slicks, then we had a chance.
We changed tires 4 times, so we are happy because it was a long time when we finished the race. So Anders and me, so we're happy now.
Nice to see. Now for Hockenheim.
Yeah, I hope to win.
We definitely try to win, and we beat those Rovers next time.
Just a week after the snows of Donington, it was the snows of Hockenheim in Germany. And still again, the tyre temperatures were causing concern. BMW, on their own home ground, were anxious to assert their position with more power. And Volvo were anxious to take their first win of the season. Could Rover, however, maintain their position? The champion Lindstrom gives us his views of the situation.
Still, the Rover is the car to beat, I think. And the Holden, I think, can do very well here. But they also need the luck because they have some small problems, which I stopped them in the other races.
The car's running extremely well. Alan thought it was running better today than it has all week, so he's hoping.
Hoping indeed, as far as the Australians were concerned, on a fast circuit that sees the Rovers out in front at the start. But right with them is Grice once more. He tries for the inside even before they get to the first corner. By the first of the famous Hockenheim chicanes, he is right with them there. But so for that matter is Volvo. Ford too are going better and well up ahead of Brock. Now there's a big effort by the second of the Volvos. There's no doubt that Granberg fancies himself as a front runner, regardless of what Cecotto might think. Smoke streaming from the tyres under braking, he's holding on to second place behind the Rover. Once again it's Schlesser who's leading the Rover opposition. Walkinshaw's back in fourth place ahead of Cecotto. Grice is through, and the Volvo tries to follow but can't quite make it. Cecotto has suddenly come up to fourth place too. An effort on the inside sees Volvo through into second place. Holden first, Volvo second, Rover third and Volvo fourth. The number one Volvo in Cecotto's hands runs with a very small master cylinder to ease the braking pressure on the injured feet of the Venezuelan, who so badly hurt himself at Brands Hatch in a Formula One car a couple of seasons ago. Dependent on the weather is how the feet feel. Today they feel obviously very well. He outbrakes Schlesser. Volvo's now second and third, and the stage is set for one of the finest battles of the season. Australia versus Sweden. Granberg pulls out and pulls back in again. Not this time. Another good look as they go out into the country. This time he's made it. Bouncing over the curbs, Ulf is ahead. Right behind him though, it's still a huge effort by Grice to hold off Cecotto. The little Australian with a minimum of sponsorship is putting on a tremendous performance here. He's back in front. Alongside him there, Granberg looks for a way through but can't find one. And this was the way this battle went on, for lap after lap. Suddenly, Cecotto got a little bit fed up with the view from behind, let alone the smoke screen. Volvo turbo power works here. Or does it? Well, both Volvo drivers were convinced that they could get ahead. Brock, meanwhile, had some problems which we'll hear about later. Now being pressured by both the Volvos, out front it's getting a bit ragged. There's some pretty tough driving out there, but it's all good clean fun. Smoke screens as well. Suddenly, Cecotto is through into second place to see what he can do. Past a Toyota. Granberg this time sitting behind the Venezuelan. Still smoke pouring off that locking front wheel. And suddenly he's back in front of the Venezuelan again. This was tremendous racing. There was no doubt whatsoever that as far as Volvo were concerned, they were in with a chance, however, when Grice slid wide and into the lead went Granberg. Cecotto tried everything he knew to follow through here, but wisely stuck behind for a little longer. He was being more careful with his tyres and with his brakes. Amid the slower cars, there was some sorting out to do. But when Granberg got sideways and on the grass, the other two caught up with him again. Crabwise there, the Holden in a power slide has Cecotto right on his tail. More smoke, more wear on that front tyre, and suddenly Cecotto is up past the Holden as well. Would he take his turn at the front? Holden and Volvo side by side as Grice once more had got back there. And this was the way it was for 20-odd laps. Slower cars, however, are always a problem on any circuit for quick drivers. One of them, on the far side of the circuit, caught out the Australian. Suddenly, he disappeared and it was Volvo first and second, and a badly damaged Commodore. The Swedish cars looked to be totally dominant. Cecotto had forced his way through to the front. He came into the pits for his scheduled stop, and everything went like clockwork for a change. Lindström was away back into the race after what, as far as they were concerned, was a very slick stop indeed. Then it was Granberg's turn. In he came and was only too happy to talk to us about the battle out there on the track once he'd seen his co-driver safely off back into the race. Volvo's appearing stronger now than they had at any time during the season.
Ulf Granberg is going well in the Volvo, but I think it great excitement for the Holden team.
Yeah, we have a very fun race, me and the Holden. We was changing place 2 and 3 times every lap, and it's fantastic. It's a long time I have so fun in a race. I'm sorry for the accident for the Holden, but anyway.
Don't look now, Ulf, but there's something happening behind you won't like. The car is out with a broken head gasket. After the first 2 wins in the season, frankly, Rover's performance at Hockenheim had been disappointing. Walkinshaw was out of the car, Wyn Percy was in it, tyres were changed, but somehow or other they lacked the speed to stay with either, of course, the Volvo, or for that matter, the BMW, now sporting the new modifications that had been homologated on the 1st of April and had been seen for the first time at Donington. The Schnitzer car was going really well, ahead of Rover, and came into the pits for a nice slick stop for Charlie Lamb and the boys. Out he went, in second place. Meanwhile, the remaining Volvo was dominating the race from the front. Cecotto had gone well, and so for that matter was Lindström going well now. Ford fortunes too had appeared to be very good here. Certainly, the cars were now well sorted. Yes, they had some engine management problems. Steve Soper was to take over from his German co-pilot, and immediately he was back in the race. Apart from the smoke at the front end there, one felt that these cars would finish. Niedewitz had done a good stint, and Soper had a healthy car. The Volvo raged on in the lead. Late in the race, there was a dramatic stop, however, for the second of the Holdens. This was to be the last race for the mobile Holden team until they came back for Spa. They were due to return to Australia. Equally, Alan Dreiser got his problems with the accident, but was to be seen more often during the season than this car. The Australians proved, however, that here they could tell the truth, if not the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. When Alan Moffat explained about the problems with the car and why everyone looked so worried.
Well, there's a minor engine problem. It's not revving out as well as it should. But I'll tell you what, this European racing, if we're not skating around in the snow, we're sliding around in the oil. The track's like a skating rink.
Back on the track, Stephen Soper was proving that, skating rink or not, the Ford handled well and had enough car to pull itself up to 3rd place. And the real truth about the Holden was that it had a hole in the sump and had had one there since lap 5. It finished, however. So did the BMW, in 2nd place, and Revelia was looking to put in, once again, a fine performance as he came through to finish behind the Volvo. Team manager Charlie Lamb, Schnitzer and the factory had taken full advantage of the modifications which are allowed to non-turbocharged car cylinder heads to give them much more power. And it was really working. The 635 was definitely a race-winning proposition. And so Cecotto and Lindström gave Volvo their first win of the season, and at least an undisputed one, which is more than you can say for later on. The Swedish car looked to be good at this stage, and definitely was well on the road perhaps towards repeating last year's domination. Welcome to round 4 of the International Touring Car Championship for 1986. We're in Italy, we're on the Adriatic, and the weather couldn't be different from that which we saw at both Hockenheim and at Donington Park. The drivers have got to contend with the heat, and they've also got to contend with a situation here which that heat brings about: tyre wear. Apart from that, however, there have been some changes. We've got the 1967 world champion, Denny Holm, in a Rover. And we've also got a change round in the Volvo team.
Well, FIA had a feeling that we two should fit each other very good.
Ulf and Thomas are, let's say, saloon car drivers since they nearly were born. That's the main difference. So it might affect the way you want the car to be set up.
Yeah, sure. We have now we have good power. We have very good balance in the car. We have good tires and good brakes. So I think in the race we are very competitive. The problem in the practice is with the turbo cars. I know from Formula 1 it's much easier to make like this, and then you have 20 horsepower more. It's not possible with our engine, but our engine is in the race is very competitive.
Well, I think it's going to be a very close race. It's a very tight circuit with some narrow pieces on it. Is that going to present a problem with the traffic?
No problem. If we can finish the first or second lap, then we go.
Denny, 19 years ago, you won the World Championship. You then drove for McLaren very successfully for several more seasons, packed it all up, went back home to Australia, drove a few saloon car races there, and now you're back in Europe. And the obvious question is, why?
Well, when I went back to New Zealand, it took me a little while before I decided I wanted to get back into a car. You know, I said I'd retire, like all the other Grand Prix drivers had, but the inkling was still there. And I suppose what really brought it on, we had a comparable car to Tom Wilkinshaw when he arrived out there and the overseas drivers, and I found I was still as quick. So I thought, it's good enough for Tom and those boys, it's good enough for me. And the opportunity arose to come back and join Tom and the team, and what better chance could I have to get back into the top team again?
Well, now in your part of the world, saloon car racing has really been leading the way as far as crowds and interest are concerned, and with a world championship in the offing as far as international touring cars are concerned, obviously the question is, are you looking for a world championship there?
Well, you're the first person that's ever asked me that question, whether I'd like to win the World Touring Car Championship. Yes, I suppose I would. My ambition, if there is an ambition, is to win a race when I'm over 50. I would really then feel I got into the Fangio category, and I would really enjoy that. But preferably Silverstone. So I've won the TT a couple of times, and if I could come back then, which would be 20 years on since I won it, I think that would be an achievement for myself.
Like a morning bath on a winter's day, it's either too hot or too cold. And that was the story at Misano as far as cars were concerned. This time it was too hot. The pace car pulled off, and Ulf Grönberg made his play for Volvo team leadership and points. Slotting in behind the Rover was Cecotto, equally anxious to prove his position as number one man, and the meat in the sandwich there was Tom Walkinshaw, with Armin Hahne in 4th place, Steve Soper 5th, and the BMW 6th. Then there was an incident at the first corner, when Brosshart collided with one of the Mercedes. Both cars were damaged, and the Mercedes was out of the race as Volvo moved up to 1st and 2nd positions. Armin Hahne driving with the handicap of a damaged leg, a legacy from an accident in a Renault Alpine a week or so before. Soper was finding himself squeezed by the BMW. He had to give way. And still Grönberg was in the lead, but Cecotto was gaining ground. Berger sat there stoically, taking care of his tyres and his brakes. And the two Rovers, knowing that they were going to have tyre problems, were somewhat put out to be headed by the Volvos at this stage. Suddenly, Cecotto took over. The Golf out of the way, through went Grönberg, but it allowed both Rovers to catch up a little. Cecotto fought on in the lead. Now, however, he was beginning to experience a few problems. There was a little question of fuel consumption. Nothing was going quite right with the Volvo #1 car, and so he had to slack off the pace a little. Grönberg enjoyed that. He looked for a place to get by, and he soon found one. Under braking, we thought it might have been the Venezuelan feet that were giving trouble more than the car. Once in the lead, Granberg made his point and got away. Harama was about to go into the pits, his tyres totally shot. Radio control between the rovers meant that Walkinshaw got the message very quickly. Denny Holmes' car had started off on a harder compound. This was a gamble that didn't come off either. As Harama came out of the pits, Holmes found himself having a burst tyre for the first time in his life, on the grass at 130 miles an hour, and having to limp back to the pits, making best use of the greenery to protect the rim. He was in for Ron Dixon to take over. In came Volvo number 2 for a scheduled stop, and it all went like clockwork. Out went Lindstrom, and all seemed well, even if Granberg appeared to be a bit hot. Chicotto came in, knocking a tyre for 6, but nothing else. Anders Olofsson took over, and then it was BMW's turn. Berger brought in a car in perfect condition, tyres were changed, Revelia took over, and it was back out into the race with a real chance for victory, and this was the reason why. The Volvo had got major problems. A lot of work took place before Thomas Lindstrom was able to go back out into the race, but at least he was feeling better than Steven Soper, who was as flat out as the car was. Olofsson out of the pits, and the delayed number 2 car in the hands of Lindstrom. The BMW now with a commanding lead, and Anders Olofsson the only man who can do anything about the domination now that Berger first and now Revelia are showing. The bespectacled Swede responded to the challenge and was closing the gap until Armin Hana's Rover dropped oil all over the circuit, which saw both Volvos off on the grass, and Anders had to start all over again. In the closing stages of the race, it was a dramatic battle. The BMW winding its way through the traffic, the Volvo closing the gap. But there was another factor here. Volvo was undoubtedly using more fuel than they anticipated, and Anders had one eye on the dashboard for the telltale yellow light. Still, he closed, worrying all the time if there was enough fuel. In the final 5 laps, it looked as if he could do it. And then we peered in the cockpit. The light came on. Anders Olofsson had to settle for second, and BMW won at Misano. The delight of the team and Charlie Lamb's boys was obvious, as was Roberto's. And I couldn't resist asking Berger the obvious question.
Gerhard, you promised me if you survive the first 2 laps you'd win the race.
The button was the beginning slow, look for the engine, look for the car, and then in the end to go hard like Roberto. It was very good.
Tom, a lot of hard work, a lot of flying about, and a lot of problems with tyres.
Yeah, but the only Dunlop tyres we didn't have on the car were the ones fitted to the transporter.
Well, this is Anderstorp, and it's round 5 of the championship for 1986. The weather throughout the whole of the last couple of 3 days has been very changeable, and today, race day, it's overcast and we could see rain. From the driver's point of view, it's not a terribly testing circuit. From the car's point of view, however, it's exactly the opposite, because it's tyres all the way and the setup of the car. Let's hear what they've got to say about their cars before the race.
Well, I think last year, Neville, it's the same as it's going to be this time. It's all down to tyre wear, your choice of tyres. We have quite a selection, which perhaps is wrong in some ways because you can sometimes confuse yourselves. But it is all down to tyre wear, tyre balance, even if sometimes we have to use 4 different compounds on 4 different wheels, as simple as that.
Very hard. This circuit is very hard on tyres, but the weather is good, it's cold, so we should make 1 pit stop, should be enough.
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the hardest circuits of the whole championship. It's much harder than Misano, and we had troubles in Misano, so let's see.
Obviously, the tyre situation meant that there was going to be a difficult race for everybody. Dunlop had fallen behind a little in development against Pirelli, and Cecotto was more than anxious to assert his position with a car that was set up entirely differently to that of Granberg and Thomas Lindstrom. Rovers once again pulled away at the start. With that tyre situation, could it last was the question. Walkinshaw led Armin Hana. Both teams would have to make 2 stops here. Even if Volvo's was to be a short one, BMW were hoping to get away with 1, however. Soon, Granberg began to close in, first passing Holm, and then closing on the 2 Rovers ahead, while Cecotto held a watching brief. With a few spots of rain coming down, his car was definitely more difficult to handle than the slightly looser setup that Granberg was using. Granberg's efforts were soon rewarded, as Walkinshaw, locking wheels in an effort to keep the Rover ahead, began to lose ground, and soon it was Volvo in the lead. Granberg in front, then the 2 Rovers, and then the second of the Volvos. Gianfranco Brancatelli, co-winner with Lindstrom of the title last year, was driving with Hana. His gentle touch would come into play with the tyre situation as it was. Then there was a surprise for the Volvo team and for Thomas Lindstrom. He wasn't ready when into the pit came the number 2 car. Amid scenes of wild panic, tyres were changed, fuel was put in, Lindstrom put on his balaclava, then his helmet, and got into the car. A very excited Granberg had got out and strapped Lindstrom in, and then found time to tell us what had happened when the car went back into the race.
Ulf, that was a quick decision to stop.
Yes, I got the fuel was empty when I come out on the straight. So I take to get into the pit. I must drive very slowly because it's yeah, I have no gasoline fuel.
By this time, BMW's fortunes had taken a dip, and Berger was out of the race with a blown engine. Meanwhile, back on the track, with the first set of scheduled pit stops over, and the staging of them for each team being a little different, it was a question of number 2 Volvo catching up. The Cecotto Anders Olofsson car was still going hard and well, but was not on the pace of the leading pair. We were waiting for Brancatelli to bring the Rover in. It had been a fine drive with the car, and certainly he'd taken care of the tyres as Armin Hana took over for the last stint. Now it was a question of whether or not Volvo's stop would make the critical difference to a Volvo victory or a Rover victory. Number 2 Volvo was still going hard and well, wastegate gashing. Number 1 car, behind him, 2 was ahead of the Rover at this stage. Hana was 3rd, the brake-locking Walkinshaw was 4th, and under orders not to pass team leader, Denny Holm was holding a watching brief in 5th place. Now it was the Volvo's turn to come in for its final stop, and the choice was taken to go on to soft rubber. The number 1 car stayed out a little longer and held on to the lead. Once Thomas was back in the race, however, he soon caught and passed the number 7 Rover. Now, however, the tyres began to go off, and Armin Hana, in spite of failing brakes, was closing the gap dramatically. The 325s were leading their class once again, over the Mercedes 190. Weaving his way through the number 1 car. He too had changed tyres by now. But the last 5 laps saw a dramatic battle. Closing the gap all the time, Armin Hana was less than a car's length behind Thomas Lindstrom. Thomas was trying to do 3 things at once: keep the car in the lead, flash his lights at the back markers, and at the same time will the flag to fall before the inevitable happened. Hana tried everything he could think of, closing up to within half a car's length here. There was nothing that Anders Olofsson could do except give moral support, and find his way past the back markers in third place. And still Walkinshaw, in it for the points, was leading Denny Holm. So obviously the New Zealander could go by if he wanted, but was told not to. Then drama. Brakes nearly failing, the Rover all but hit the back of the Volvo here. He then lined up for an effort on the inside as they came to the hairpin after the straight. There wasn't room to do it. He was obviously going to try on the way out. He touched the tail here, then pulled out, and that's probably what spoiled his effort to accelerate past the Volvo. Either way, it was any way, which way, but lose for Thomas Lindström, who came back again into the stadium with a car's length, which he held right the way up to the flag. It was a pity that following this exciting race, the protest could start in the International Touring Car Championship, with Volvo first and third, and Walkinshaw finishing in fourth place from Denny Holm in fifth. After the race, I talked to Lindström and to Ulf Granberg about their victory, however.
Well, the partnership worked well in Sweden for the first time.
Yeah, it was successful, so I'm happy.
Which was the worst part, driving the car or watching him drive it?
Yeah, watching him driving. Oof, I was so nervous. I can talk and do nothing.
Thomas, you took over a car. This time it worked. What about the brakes? Were they getting a bit tired?
No problem at all. The car was wonderful the whole time. I really love the trip, very much.
Those last few laps are something that are going to stay in your mind for a long time, probably in bed tonight, I'd think.
Yeah, I think I'm going to do the race during the night, yes, once more.
Round 6 of the championship at Czechoslovakia. Brno the venue, the last time on this famous old circuit, which sends shivers up the spines of any racing driver, with the village, the wooded section, and indeed the tight hairpins, all at over 150 miles per hour. Could Volvos do it again, following their victory in Sweden and their victory, of course, in Germany? Would BMW make it? Or could Rover make a comeback at this stage? Ford had been out. They had not done Sweden. The cars had been redeveloped and Eggenberger's boys had rebuilt the engines. Now they were first and second on the grid at the end of practice. And Stephen Soper was confident.
Yes, very happy actually. Very happy for Eggenberger and obviously Mike and myself and Ford. Very good, that's what we've been waiting for.
How much does the slippery shape of the car, the aerodynamics, contribute to the tremendous lap in qualifying?
Yeah, I think a tremendous amount. Obviously the Volvo is a bit like a brick down the straight, and I reckon we've got sort of 10, 15 miles an hour on it.
What sort of speed do you reckon you're doing then?
Well, Rudy worked it out and said 175 mile an hour, which gave me a bit of a fright actually. But it's doing 285 kilometres, so, you know, I don't know. Sounds too fast to me.
We are very surprised about the Sierras. They were so very quick. But I think they must have found a lot of power somewhere, because they are very quick on the straights.
It's very exhilarating. It's a superb circuit. I've absolutely loved coming here. It's the first time I've raced at Brno, and I'm looking forward to the race. It's one of the few real circuits left in the world, and it's a brilliant place.
It's a little bit dangerous. It's very narrow, and with all this Armco all around, very bumpy. So it's, I think for the race it's a little bit tight.
If it frightened me, I wouldn't be here.
Not even a little bit?
No, I don't think so. You know, it's very fast, and you know how difficult it is before you come. So after you're here, you just get on with the job.
And they did get on with it. The Fords, just as in practice, were in the lead when they came round at the end of lap 1. Soper fixing his position as number 1 man in the team. The BMW in 4th place, Berger revelling in the swerves. And the Volvos currently not showing as well perhaps as everyone had expected. But Johnny Cecotto was in his element here. He loved the circuit, gloried in it. He'd last been here on a motorbike. And as Steve Soper was in the lead, there was a tremendous battle behind, with everybody crawling all over Pierre Dodonné in the second of the Fords. Jeff Allen had made a bad start in the third of the Rovers, and was having BMW 325s and Mercedes crawl all over him in Class 2. Ford still first and second, but a tremendous battle going on behind, and the Volvo of Johnny Cecotto looking for a way past Dodonné. There wasn't a way, at least not there, but perhaps there was when they came down to the hairpin. He tried to get alongside. When he came to get back again, he found that Granberg was on one side of him and Walkinshaw on the other, and it was a bit tight. Once got rid of, the Ford began to drop back, at least as far as Dodonné's car was concerned. But then the battle really began, with the two Volvos and no team orders issued fighting each other as hard as they were fighting Walkinshaw, who was the red meat in the sandwich. Slowly but surely, they began to take distance back off Steve Soper in the lead, whose challenge was beginning to fade a bit by now. A puff of black smoke as Soper changed down, and Walkinshaw made a bid. It didn't come off. Jeff Allen now was right up with the rest of the Rovers and Fords. Walkinshaw got himself ahead of both Volvos, and Allen all but hit the guardrail and then came tight in behind in spectacular motoring. Now Granberg had a go. He moved up ahead of Cecotto. Soper hung on at the front. Walkinshaw on a power slide here in very spectacular form. Such bravery had to be rewarded, and soon Walkinshaw was right on the tail of the Ford. Volvo still with Ulf Granberg leading Cecotto, and then Walkinshaw in the lead, with the Volvos all over Soper. In the pits, the Walkinshaw warlords, Win Percy and Armin Hana, hold council. Now Volvo is in front, and all but colliding there, Granberg snatches second place from the Ford. Walkinshaw still fourth. But once in front, the two Swedish cars, Cecotto and Granberg, began to pull away. They were battling among themselves as hard as ever they battled with anybody else. Back out after his pit stop, it was Swede Anders Olofsson. In behind him came the second of the cars. Granberg was out and Thomas Lindström was in, and Fisa's Christian de Barret played football with a wheel nut. He didn't score. The pit stop times were so close between the Volvos that when they returned to the circuit, there was just as little between them then as there had been before they both came in. Off the jacks went car number 2, and the battle on the track continued just as fiercely as before. BMW made their stop next. Away went Revelia. And in came Tom Walkinshaw to hand over to Win Percy, overshooting slightly and having to be pushed. The Rover team proved they could cope with two cars at once as Jeff Allen came in for Denny Holm to take the wheel. Out went another BMW, but on the track it was Volvo all the way. Meanwhile, what had happened to the Fords? Well, the number 3 car was out. The number 4 car was still running. And Mike Jackwell told us about their dramas.
Oh, we had a backfire in the spillage of fuel. It just caught a light and obviously had to put it out.
How did you feel about that, sitting in the car?
No, it was just one of those things that happens. You know, you just got to Pierre jump back in. We had to run the car, there wasn't much damage, but it's just a pity that both cars are really out of contention.
Back to the track again, and now the question was what would happen when the next round of pit stops took place. Volvo were due to make one more for a quick top-up with fuel as they went by nose and tail. Lindström in the lead, behind him Anders Olofsson. Win Percy was holding on to third place with number 8 Rover. Thomas Lindström probably knows Volvos better than anybody else when it comes to mechanical problems and how much fuel they should use, etc. He decided on a 14-second stop, and out went the car in second place. Meanwhile, Anders Olofsson, in the lead, trying to find a way past the Ford, was left to make up his mind. He came in for a very much shorter stop. Approximately 7 seconds the car was stationary. Fuel went in, brakes and tyres were checked, and it was back out into the race for car number 1. Ostensibly, therefore, he should have won. Meanwhile, the Mercedes had collided with the BMW, and once again, Revelia was driving a badly damaged car. He limped on. The last lap, and Volvos in first and second places are watched by John Wickham. Through they come, with the number 1 car in the lead, Olofsson, and the number 2 car, Lindström, in second place. And then, on the far side of the circuit, Olofsson ran out of fuel. Lindström passed him to come through to win. The Rover got through into second place. And limping home, Anders Olofsson had to be satisfied with third. Cecotto was so disgusted, he didn't even go to the presentation. Volvo first, Rover second, Volvo third. It had been the second win in a row for Ulf Granberg and Thomas Lindström, and Thomas recognised his good luck on this occasion.
2 laps from finish, I was sure he was second today, and suddenly it changed very quick.
From Czechoslovakia, it was just across the border into Austria, to the Nurburgring and round 7 of the championship, on what has to be the most picturesque circuit, perhaps, of the whole of the International Touring Car Championship. Set on a plain in the Austrian mountains, they don't build circuits like this anymore. It's a tremendous challenge to both car and driver. If you're really on the pace, you can score seconds at the Nurburgring. Practice, however, had caused a fair series of spins and incidents of one sort or another. And Stephen Soper was among the people who had a real good old English lose it.
Not mine.
And number 3 on the side.
Yeah? It must have been 13, he lost to 1.
Siggy was saying that he thought there might be a bit of a problem staying with the Rovers and the Volvos here. Do you think that will apply?
I don't know. I think we'll have to sock it and see. I'm quite confident we will be with them. I'm not confident that we can do what we did at Brno and clear off into the lead and sort of keep out of sight and away from everyone. But I'm for sure we should be in touch. I'll be surprised if we're not in touch. But then it's a long race and we'll have to see what happens.
With 3 wins in 3 races, Volvo had got to be the favourites as far as Austria were concerned. Here in 1985, they'd had a 1-2 victory. Johnny Cecotto set off in determined style, with the Rovers snapping at his heels, the Fords well up, BMW too. Emanuele Pirro was deputising for Berger, away racing a Benetton Grand Prix car. And Emanuele was determined that he was going to be right up with the Rover-Volvo opposition as they set forth on what was to be an interesting, if perhaps a surprising race. Something went badly wrong here as far as Cecotto and Jeff Allen was concerned, and the man who suffered was Pirro, going off the road, cannoning off the Volvo indeed, into the long grass and the mud, and getting stuck there, basically out of contention. Rovers first, second and third. And while Cecotto tries to collect his emotions, through comes Granberg into 4th place, and the Ford right up with them, together with the second of the BMWs and Pierre Dodonne's Ford. Over the top of the daunting hill, and on the inside, the Ford made a bid to take 3rd place, but it didn't come off. Armin Hahne holding on to that 3rd place, and the Volvo now separating the 2 Coventry cars. It was a big effort now by Cecotto to pull himself together, get on with the job, and get out after the Rovers, while Soper is patently looking for a gap that isn't there. Over the top of the rise, Cecotto in charge. And still Soper looking for a way past Armin Hahne. The best view of the lot, Ulf Granberg, back behind and watching the fun. But now Walkinshaw's Rover is out of the race. And Rovers look to have shot their bolt as far as Austria is concerned. with Cecotto in front, and in a firm second place and going hard and well of Brandberg. That's the way it stayed in Austria. There was no question that Ford were going well and gaining ground, for it was a fine third place for Dodone and Muller. Taking over rover number 7, it was Win Persing to bring the car through to 4th place. Volvo passed the flag for a 1-2 victory, albeit it was the beginning of even more disputes as we moved on to the Nurburgring in Germany. This is a circuit that has been emasculated in the minds of many drivers. So much so that there's been intense pressure from many of them and the teams to bring the race next year back to the old ring. Without an anaesthetic, dentist Armin Hahner tells us why.
Okay, the old Nürburgring, there was more fun, more jumps, more thrill, and I think more spectators, because here for the spectators it's a little bit boring because they are too far away from the circuit. They just can see the starting number, I think.
Well, you didn't need to see the numbers to know that BMW were anxious to put in a good performance here in Germany. Back too on this occasion was Alan Grice with the Holden, and proving once again that the Australian car was right up with the leaders. Nevertheless, Emanuele Pirro was determined to make up for what had happened in Austria. Pirro BMW first, Walkinshaw second, Niedewitz third, and then the 2 Volvos, with Cecotto currently heading off Brandberg. Behind him, Armin Hahner, the second of the Fords in Muller's hands, and Grice. Niedewitz was determined to stay on his bike this time. Quote, he fell off and hurt himself here last year. He forced his way up onto the tail of the Volvo, which in turn was determined to try and displace the Rover and have a go at the BMW. Niedewitz ignored what the abrasive circuit was doing to his rubber. He took the lead, but was to soon pay the price for his impetuosity. For through came Johnny Cecotto ahead of him. And Grice too was certainly well on the pace at this stage. But up to and beyond the first pit stops, it looked as if Volvo could make it 4 in a row. Then with 27 laps to go, there was drama. First, Niedewitz brought the Ford into the pits with irrecurable engine trouble and retired from the race. Then, suffering from the same wastegate problems as had afflicted the number 2 car, in came Anders Olofsson with deep trouble as far as number 1 was concerned, and the whole pattern of the race changed. It had been a fine drive by Pirro and then Revelia. These two were now in a dominating position, having taken care of the tyres and the car. BMW had snatched their second victory of the season, and there was nothing anybody could do about it. And so we moved on to the 9th round of the championship, the blue ribbon event at Spa, the 24-hour race. Johnny Cecotto assesses his and Volvo's chances.
Usually these cars are very reliable for 500 kilometers, but unless some small problems like we had in the past. But for 24 hours you can have many more of these problems, and this is what you don't know. I mean, if you're lucky and nothing goes wrong with the car, it's possible to win.
Yeah, that takes a lot of luck. I've won 2 times, so obviously I had a lot of luck there. But I think this year the Rovers are feeling very strong, and we've done good times on normal race rubber and full tank, and we are very optimistic for that race, I think. So it looks all very good for us, I think.
Yeah, I think the important thing on this race is to make a good setup for 24 hours. Qualifying is only for show, but we have a good race setup, and I think if we don't have problems, the other must work hard to beat us.
BMW are notorious for their success in the Spa 24-hour race. As the cars pulled away at the start, they had proved in practice that it was a battle between them and Rover. Walkinshaw led from Pirro, Hahner, Brandberg in the Volvo, Cecotto's car, Dodone's Ford, Grice with the Holden well up, Grosser's Ford, Questa's BMW and the Soper Niedewitz Ford, with the Cudini and Snowbeck Mercedes equally very surprisingly well up. The circuit had been changed. Over the last few years, however, it's been recognised as being a work of art still in its shortened form. At the start, with 3 more Holdens in and Grice among them, everyone felt that the Australians stood a good chance too. And it was a battle of nerves between BMW and Rover. Soon, Armin Hahne, flashing his lights, slotted in behind Walkinshaw. Meanwhile, we go in car with Ulf Granberg and watch how he lost 4th place to the BMW. The second of the mobile Holdens was being driven very carefully by 3 New Zealanders. But Grice was determined to stay with the Rovers and everybody else as well. Pierre de Donny is Belgian and proud of it, and held on to 3rd place in the early stages of the race. There was also a contest for the last of the late breakers between BMW, Volvo and Holden. And Peter Brock lost. Granberg won that one. But a certain Volkswagen driver didn't win this one. He deposited his oil all over the track just before the leaders arrived upon the scene. Walkinshaw leading Hahne. Out of camera, Hahne has a big moment, and Tom comes through on his own. Up the hill and out of sight, and looking to have things well in hand, perhaps he overdid it a little here and wore the tyres out, as a result of which Hahne was soon back in front and Tom was falling back. Grice first had a tyre go down. Then the wheel came off. The result was clouds of dust, stone, damage to the brake drum, damage to the bodywork, and a long, long delay for the Holden. Like the proverbial magician, he disappeared in a cloud of dust towards the pits. Prior to him getting there, Peter Brock had arrived with, oh dear, a head gasket gone. This didn't augur well for the Australian chances for outright victory. Nevertheless, they were interested too in the Commander's Cup, the first team home of 3 cars. Grice now struggled in to explain who did what and with which and to whom to Michel Delcourt. Belgians seem to be taking it quite well. De Donne's sparkling performance ended with a rod through the side and an early retirement for number 4 car in the Ford team. Armin Hahne brought the Rover in from a commanding lead for a tyre change, a change of driver, and all looked well as far as the Coventry team were concerned. They had the experience, they had the knowledge, they detuned the cars a little, and they should prove reliable, was the general feeling in the team. And while the traffic delayed Jeff Allen's exit, Berger was a study of concentration as he waited for the BMW to come in. It arrived, out leapt Pirot, and in leapt the Austrian. Meanwhile, out on the track, Rover was as dominating as anybody can be, with 3 hours of a 24-hour race over. Still, that car was going well, as was the Ford that was left in the hands of Steven Soper and Klaus Niedewitz. As the light begins to fail, it's 23 degrees, 22 minutes past 9, and the spectators are straining their eyes to see the numbers of the cars and their ears to hear the commentary. For Volvo, the contest is going well. They're up to 2nd place, but the race is still dominated by Rover, and Brock is hustling on in the Commodore, trying to make up for lost time. The Rover comes in for a scheduled stop. 6 hours are completed now, and as on go the new wheels and in goes the fuel, we look at the positions. Hahne leads, Cecotto is 2nd, Pirot is 3rd, Walkinshaw is 4th, Metsch is 5th, and Snowbeck in the little Mercedes is 6th. The romance of nighttime racing. The tired pit crews, the depleted cars and drivers greet the coming of dawn. 12 hours now have been completed at Spa. Walkinshaw leads, Pirot is second, Cuesta is third, Harama fourth, the Wittmer BMW fifth and Ross's similar car sixth. And the Volvo challenge has faded with the dark. But for BMW, there's still a very good chance of success. Both Rovers have rear axle problems. As the lights go off, less strain on the battery of course by now, it's obvious that some changes could very well happen. The leading Rover soldiers on, as into the pits comes the Volvo, for one-time Grand Prix driver Mauro Boldi to get out, and sometime Grand Prix driver Johnny Cecotto to get in. More and more Grand Prix pilots are taking notice of touring car racing nowadays, particularly at Spa. In spite of their catalogue of success, there's certainly dissension in the Volvo team. Lindström and Granberg rarely pass comment on Cecotto and vice versa. The car is refueled, brake pads are changed, oil goes in, Johnny Cecotto sits there calmly, and soon it's off the jacks and back into the race. The Australian story has been a complicated one. There have been all sorts of problems. Brock has brought his own personal doctor along, known as the witch doctor to the team. With the assistance of Peter's wife, he appears to think it's necessary to stitch Peter's arm back on. Now the Rover problems have really taken hold. It's a question of two wheels on my wagon. Tom Walkinshaw has already changed into civvies. Wyn Percy sits in the car like a spare bride at a wedding, and obviously has turned down Tom's proposal of marriage. He doesn't seem too upset by it though. As far as BMW are concerned, they're brimful of confidence. Only one Rover is left actually running. Harama leads, Pirot is second, Cuesta is third, Rossi is fourth, Walkinshaw is fifth, and Voigt with the 325 is sixth, and that second Rover is destined to retire. Into the lead goes the battered number 10 BMW. But his tenure of office is not to be for long. There was an accident during the night. Berger confers with the team. The car has a problem. It's falling back rapidly and indeed has now lost its lead to his teammate. The repairs continue, however, and are successful in time for the Schnitzer cars to finish in first and third places in a BMW walkover. Dieter Cuesta leading the way home. Magnificent weather, boiling hot, and the Rover drivers determined to have to use their cold suits for round 11 of the championship. And Roberto Avelia's second place at Silverstone has made him a man to watch for championship honours in 1986.
Roberto, we moved to Nagaro after Silverstone where you finished second. Can you go one better here? Can you win?
This is, I think, a good circuit for BMW, and also this morning Berger was the quickest in the warm-up, and I think we have a really good car for the race, and we have a good chance. It's important to finish because it's very, very hard for all the cars, I think, for the tires, because the circuit is terrible.
From the heat of the day to the heat of battle, and Ford determined to go well here and make up for their disappointment. Slot in behind Rover in the lead, Rover in third place, Volvo in fourth. Smoke pouring there from Walkinshaw's car as he tries to get away from the opposition, and BMW right on the pace. Johnny Cecotto wants to go well here. He wants to keep championship chances alive for Volvo, in spite of all the troubles that are going on at the FIA over regulations and the breaking of them. But soon it's Ford in the lead. Klaus Niedewitz beginning to pull away a little. Behind, Cecotto is really on form. An outbraking manoeuvre disposes of Walkinshaw. A repeat performance for a man with bad feet disposes of the Ford, and into the lead goes Volvo. Niedewitz tries to fight back, as into the pits goes the BMW. Berger after a fine stint to hand over to Revelia. Siggy Muller holds up his hand for his Ford to come in. In comes Cecotto, and to his amazement, into the car gets Thomas Lindstrom. Johnny doesn't know quite what to make of that, neither for that matter does anybody else. Italian, start your engine, in sign language from a German, as out into the lead goes the BMW. The Volvo in second place, and Steve Soper in the Ford, nearly a lap behind in third. Lindstrom leaves the pits. Steve Soper hangs on to that third place. Revelia and Berger in the BMW win the French round of the championship from the Volvo in second place. And from Soper in third place. And Revelia's chances for championship honours are definitely on an upward swing. When Percy finishes fourth in the Rover, the nearest challenger, as we ask Roberto what he feels about it all now.
Berger has been fantastic for me in the first turn because it was really quick, and when I take the car I was in front with half a minute, and for me very easy.
And from the presentation in France, we go to what proved to be one of the most disappointing rounds of the season, insofar as no one liked the new circuit at Zolder in Belgium. In the past, Zolder had been one of those races which everybody liked to go to. This is how Tom Walkinshaw lost championship chances for himself and Win Percy in 1985. He presented the job to Volvo on a plate. Brancatelli and Lindstrom were the winners. It was a different story in 1986, however. New chicanes had been added. Johnny Cecotto tried to outdrag the Ford and all but caused disaster. Alan Grice clipped the back of Niedewit's car. Through came Walkinshaw into third place, and Grice was alongside the Volvo and away out and in front. The sand getting on the track and the tight chicanes made for some close and exciting racing, and when oil was dropped, there was definitely a problem as far as Grice was concerned. His lead began to disappear. Ford and Volvo set about a Rover in determined style. Bang! Niedewitz there touches the tail. Another Ford gets sideways, but no harm done. Grice was forcing his way at the head of the field, but behind him, the battle was closing in. Niedewitz was being closely followed by the Rover and Cecotto. Then the BMW got on the inside of Tom. This was the result of that manoeuvre. Rover on the sand, and off it again. The Ford closes in on Grice's Holden. And George Brossard, in the inimitable words of Graham Hill, goes from gentleman to twit in 5 seconds. The Rover is through and passed safely, however. The next excitement was the battle for the lead, and we'll leave the drivers to explain about this controversial incident. Klaus Niedewitz first.
I was behind the Holden and he closed the door 3 times. When I tried it again before the chicane, when he shut the door again and we comes together and I was out.
I think your terminology is incorrect. I was on the line and he slid down the inside of me with them all locked up and crashed into the side of me. And what happened to him after that, I don't know. Nor particularly care. It was his problem.
I don't know what the Swedish is, so I never look a gift horse in the mouth, but this was certainly one as far as Cecotto and, yes, Lindstrom were concerned, because it was the Swede who took over. In came the BMW. Hard work taking place here. Berger leaps out, Revelia leaps in. But there was more drama to come. Oil all over the circuit. Out came the pace car once more, while the marshals tried to deal with it. The field bunched up behind. The Holden was out of the race. And with the pace car back in, Win Percy was hustling on in the Rover, no longer in contention for the lead. In front of him, a huge moment for Lindstrom with the Volvo. Fortunately, he got it into reverse, kept the engine running, and lost very little time. BMW too was to have its dramas in the final stages of the race, when Revelia in second place kissed the Rover and ended up in the sand. Volvo had kept their championship chances alive. Thomas Lindström was to take his second consecutive win here at Zolder, and told us all about it at the finish.
Yes, it was the second time now. Last time was last year.
What did you feel at the end there with the car spun?
No, I had no grip, and what was disturbing was the Armin Hane, because he was so crazy in his driving, because he tried to break into the car in all the corners and even overtake me on yellow flag. And I didn't get the right grip after the pace car. So when I was braking out late on here, just the rear wheels was braking, and then the car started to spin, and I tried just to keep it on the track to not lose too much time.
Must have been a fairly heart-stopping moment, though.
Yeah, but it's fun for the public, and so it was no problem this time.
By the time the presentation took place, it was almost dark and too late to play music without contravening the local bylaws. Round 13 of the championship at Harama in Spain. And the battles in the bullring are nothing to the battles on the circuit, as Rover, BMW, Ford and Volvo fight it out. A win for win.
I think after the rain this morning, it's a little bit of a lottery, this particular race. I mean, no one's even practiced in the wet here because qualifying conditions have all been dry. So it's a little bit of anybody's race. I think 90% of the cars are on slicks, although at the moment the track is still very wet. So it's a case of suck it and see, I'm afraid.
And now the weather forecast, courtesy of Emanuele Pirro.
Ladies and gentlemen, the news of today, the weather is pretty cloudy, but we expect some sunshine later tonight around midnight.
Is that a good thing for Emanuele and BMW?
Yeah, I mean, when it rains, it's a few more chances for us, but the problem is Roberto Ravaglia is driving and fighting for the championship, so the rain might be a little bit odd in this case, you know. But I try to be careful to give him the best chances. See you after the race.
Well, certainly exuding confidence, Emanuele Pirro was starting the car with some real hope of success in a race that was led initially by Ford. But what a battle it turned out to be at the front of the field. Yes, once again, Steve Soper led two Rovers, Volvo and Holden. But it was beginning to spot with rain. Already there was some damage to the back of the Grice Holden. The Ford got ahead of the Rover and looked as if he intended to stay there. Walkinshaw trying all he knew to stay with him. Behind, a huge effort here by Johnny Cecotto, outbraking once again Walkinshaw. Going wide, all but losing the place, but holding on somehow. Grice was under heavy pressure from Mauro Golding, until he got pushed off by an errant BMW. Volvo forced their way through into the lead. And once again, Johnny Cecotto looked set for victory. Lindström waited in the pits. Was he going to be allowed to take over the number one car? The answer was yes. A problem here for the Volvo, slowing it a little. Number 4 Ford in the hands of Klaus Ludwig, also well up. His debut drive in this year's championship. It was just like old times. Volvo versus Rover for the lead of the race. Cecotto was back at the wheel of the Volvo after its second stop and was hurrying on, now in second place, trying to make up ground. In the pit, however, was a somewhat annoyed Armin Hane, and he tells us the reason why.
We were coming around the hairpin and there was Questa and the Volvo was in front. And he showed us to the right side, so I moved to the right side and then he suddenly went over to the left side. I think he did it on purpose because he just saw me coming. And I'll just pay back, that's all.
For Armin, the war definitely isn't over. For Tom Walkinshaw, it isn't either. He's back in the lead with Volvo second and BMW third, and the proverbial pocket handkerchief covering the first three. But then it's drama. Cecotto has got a problem. He's not sure what it is, but it's a late call at the pits to find out. The Rover's got a problem. The engine keeps cutting out. And blasting past him goes the BMW, onwards towards victory. Emanuele Pirro and Roberto Ravaglia win in Spain.
In fact, today is the third win in a row, and 3 weeks in a row, and second win in a row in Harama. Last weekend in 3000, this weekend in ETC. So I'm quite pleased about the end of the season. It's not finished yet because we go to Estoril, and I try to give my very best to help Roberto win the championship.
Thank you very much. Can you do that, Roberto?
In Estoril?
Yeah.
I don't know. Now I think about the championship. I don't know. I think it's very good for us, Estoril. It's good for BMW, the circuit. We will see next week.
Sea, sun and sand in Estoril, Portugal for round 14 of the championship. And if the battles that are going on the track are in some way being detracted from by the battles that are going on in the FIA over the regulations, there's no question that this final round of the championship is going to be exciting. Ford, BMW and Rover try to outbrake each other into the first corner, and it's the two Fords that take the lead. In third place behind them, Rover, then BMW, Volvo, the second of the BMWs, and the second of the Volvos. Grice is forcing his way through. David Kennedy co-driving means that this is a strong team pairing, and Cecotto does the outbraking manoeuvre to come through to separate the Fords. Grice now moves up to fourth. The Ford-Volvo battle continues on at the head of the field, however. Then suddenly, Grice has clipped the second of the Fords. Both are delayed, and certainly as far as they're concerned, their chances of leading the race are out. Once again, Cecotto, bad feet and all, outbreaks the Ford and takes the lead for Volvo. He's determined to show the way home, if at all possible. Walkinshaw holds on to third place with a Rover. A Mercedes spins out onto the grass and miraculously is collected by nobody. In comes Walkinshaw for Win Percy to take over the car. Both BMWs are running in close company, leaving Ravaglia a choice. In comes the Volvo, and he doesn't look to be the easiest of stops here. There's some consternation going on, and this time it's Anders Olofsson that takes over, not Thomas Lindström. The Ford is also in for a change of tyres, and Rudi Eggenberger knows that this one could be going their way. Olofsson is back in the pits with a problem, and Ravaglia has an even bigger one. Which one of two non-too-healthy cars does he take over? Tom Walkinshaw compares notes with Andy Morrison. The Ford leads the race comfortably. The battle for championship honours is between Ravaglia in the BMW and Win Percy in Rover number 8. Finally, Roberto makes his choice. Out gets the green-clad Ivan Capelli, and in gets the Italian. Win Percy is going hard and well, and laps his rival here for championship honours. Roberto has a sick car, while Jeff Allen takes up the fight on behalf of Germany against Germany to get his own back for Armin Hahne by brushing Dieter Questa. It's a victory for Ford in the final round of the International Touring Car Championship for 1986. Steven Soper and Klaus Niedewitz get their first well-deserved, undisputed win of the season. Or do they? There have been so many disputes over what is and what isn't legal with the cars. It clouded, indeed, the whole finish of the championship and delayed the announcement of the International Touring Car Champion for 1986. It looks as if that honour has gone to Roberto Ravaglia. Next year, it's the World Touring Car Championship, and we shall be there.